Thad Brown, Carl Jones here, ready to talk about NFL Draft Corners 2022. Carl is in. Let me see how I get him in. Add as speaker. There you go, Carl. You're a speaker now, too. Hope you can hear me okay. Hope everybody can hear me okay.
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Very nice. All right, good. The whole Thad as a speaker thing, or Thad as the host thing, is still something I'm brand new to. There we go. All right. So we're talking NFL corners or NFL corners that will be corners in the NFL in the draft. And Carl, I think one thing you and I have talked about a little bit the last couple of days is comparing this class to the last class, and also kind of looking at this class as a whole. And I think you and I both like what's at the very top, but in general, the entirety of this class is not something that's blown us away. Let's start with the top, though. And I think the two guys that everybody likes the best, you and I agree with this, Sauce Gardner and Stingley. And, I think you and I are both impressed with these guys for different reasons. For me, I mean, the measurables on Gardner are just out of this world. The thing, when you turn him on, you read that he's 6'2", whatever, and you think, wow, he's going to be really tall as a corner. And then you flip the thing on, and the guy looks like Randy Moss playing DB, So it's just almost hilarious to see, who is this guy running around defensive back? They should have made him a tight end, but he's got the speed. He's got the height. The question is, obviously, can he translate that to an NFL game on an every week level? So give me your impressions first, as a guy who played at Syracuse, who was a defensive back, when you see a guy like Sauce Gardner, which, again, the moment you flip him on TV, it's a totally different look for a corner. What's your take on Sauce Gardner so far?
So for me, you see Cincinnati and you're like, okay, I'm going to look for a reason to critique, because obviously you don't want a helmet scout, but he's not playing the consistent talent on the other side of the ball like they do in the SEC, Big Ten, this, that, and the third. But when he had the opportunity to go up against those guys, just like Alabama, like Georgia, played Indiana, he showed up and he did exactly what he was supposed to do. His length was a deterrent for all the teams that he played against. And for someone like myself, who wasn't the longest corner, I'm probably sub 30 with my arm length, he uses it very, very well. And not just at the line of scrimmage, which is probably most obvious and apparent when he can use his length, down the field as well, when the receivers want to break away from him and cut off their routes. He uses that length very well. When he's a shade under 6'3", and he moves as if he's like around the 5'11", which is unheard of for that size. That's just the first thing that comes to mind. On tape, he wasn't really tried often too deep, just because fact of the matter, who's going to throw at the guy who's that long. But then he runs in the 4.4, so he kind of throws away the idea that he might not be able to run with guys at the next level. Like you say, it kind of has the Randy Moss idea, where if you want to build a corner, he's going to look exactly like him. Tall, rangy, can run. I'm not going to say the entire total package, but when you talk about just the pure physical tools that he brings to the table, I think they're second to none.
The thing that I noticed with him, or maybe the concern with him, is that he's so big and so rangy. I wonder how the super quick guys are gonna be able to attack him. Like, this is a guy, if the Bills, if he ended up in Buffalo, he's got to face Tyreek Hill twice a year. Is that guy going to be able to take someone who's just so long and so limmy, for lack of a better term? Is how much is Sauce Gardner going to have a problem, being able to hang with that guy? Now, look, he's so big, he could theoretically just press him and swallow him up the line of scrimmage. But I guess that's my number one concern, because he's got such size and no one's ever seen it before. I think is it fair to say, just because he's really big doesn't necessarily mean really big is really better?
Oh, that's a great point. And I think it's kind of scheme specific and matchup dependent. I'm not going to ask a guy like Sauce Gardner to follow Tyreek Hill around the field. A guy like Sauce Gardner, I'm going to put him in the boundary and just take away that side of the field and use his length as a deterrent in that way. I would much rather a quicker guy like a Trey White or someone of that stature to follow a Tyreek Hill around the field in that nature. You're doing Sauce a disservice by making him a travel corner, so to speak. I don't think that's his game. I don't think that's where he thrives best at. I think we hear cornerback and we think shut down and travel and island guys, and not all those guys are cut from that cloth. And I think there's pros and cons to that style of play. But Sauce isn't that guy, but that's okay. Trust me, there's thousands of guys in the NFL across the history who've been great at that position, who haven't been travel guys. And I think Sauce is a great example of that. I don't want to make it a direct comparison because Richard Sherman's an all-pro and future Hall of Famer. But picture Richard Sherman in his prime where he just shut down one side of the field. He really didn't follow guys, so to speak. He just stayed on that side of the field. If you just ask Sauce Gardner and be like, hey, the quarterback is just not going to look in your direction. Just go out there and shut down and do your 111th. I think if he lives up to his potential, I think that's a very high ceiling for him.
And no one's going to mind having a guy that takes away half of a field, even if he doesn't stay with the other team's number one receiver every single snap of the game. Let's talk quick about Derek Stingley. You know, I obviously the only question with him is the injuries the last 2 years. I think he's played something like, 5 or 6 games, whatever. It's been obviously very disappointing. The freshman year tape is fantastic. It's almost like there's not really a discussion point here because, yeah, he's awesome if he's healthy, and is he going to stay healthy?
Yeah, that freshman year tape, I remember that was the year that I left college, and I'm watching his tape and I'm jealous. I'm like, this kid's 17, 18 years old, prime SEC, and going toe-to-toe with everyone. I mean, week in and week out, they're throwing him at the Wolves. I mean, you got to think about it. These are the days where Devontae Smith is out there, Jalen Waddle, all these prime SEC guys, and he's out there doing his thing. But then 2021 and 20, that guy wasn't there. And was it the injuries? Was it, I guess, just a lack of focus? I'm not in the rooms. I'm not a scout. I don't know exactly what happened the last 2 years. But that guy in 2019, I don't want to speak of hyperbole, but that was my favorite corner to watch as an 18-year-old. So if he's healthy and he lives up to his potential and he's locked in, so to speak, there's not going to be many guys who are better than him at that position in the league.
Here's a question you and I talked about a little bit. I like Stingley and Sauce better than anybody who came out of corner last year. And then I like maybe 4 or 5 guys at the top last year better than anybody else in this draft. And I would put those 4 or 5 guys way closer to Sauce and Stingley than anybody else in this draft. Where do you come out on that kind of point of view?
For me, I was really, really high on Surtain, Horn, and Newsome last year. And I would probably put those 3 just a tad above Stingley. I will put them just a tad above Sauce, and then probably put Stingley in that same top 4. And the only reason I say that is I really love Surtain's ability to be technically sound. And I know with Alabama corners, we're all like, all right, they're all like this at Bama, and then they get to the league. But I really thought with his combination of athleticism and his technique, I was really impressed with him. But I think that's a fair assessment. I think the depth of last year's class was very, very impressive. I mean, Eric Stokes, we didn't even bring up, was, I think, one of the top rookies in this class last year, went to Green Bay. So that class last year was one of the best I think we've ever seen. I think after 2 this year, it gets a little dicey, and that's where it gets really, really interesting for those who miss out on Sauce and Stingley.
Let's talk about those other guys then, because I think the general opinion, and I want to circle back to this in a minute, about maybe Buffalo trading up to go after a Stingley or Gardner, whether they fall or not. I mean, the Bills probably have, the ammunition if they want to spend it to get up in the top 10 if they felt they needed to. But if they sit at 25, or maybe if the move is smaller, the guy I like the best from a Bills fit point of view in terms of a player that looks like a guy who belongs in Buffalo is Trent McDuffie from Washington. This is a guy, to me, look, good quicks, really smooth, mirrors pretty well, and the thing about McDuffie too, he's a good tackler, looks like he can play nickel pretty easily. I could even see him theoretically as a safety too. And you know how the Bills love their versatility guys. Now you draft McDuffie, if Taron Johnson becomes too expensive, you want to move on from him, or, those 2 safeties are both on the wrong side of 30. So if you want to move on from one of those 2 guys because you don't want to spend that money, McDuffie could be an option. And Carl, this is where I want you to weigh in. The number one knock on McDuffie is that he's a sub 29 inch arm length guy. As a corner who played, in the ACC, what kind of a hindrance is it to have those short arms? Because when I watch Trent McDuffie on tape, I don't see any issue with arms or legs or head or anything.
Hold on 1 second. I'm sorry.
Carl, we lose you there?
Yeah, I'm back with you.
Oh, yeah. So just
So
give
I
me,
heard that. Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
So for McDuffie, I before I go further, I just want to talk about this arm length thing. And I'm not huge on statistics and you know, making concrete opinions on that. But right before this, I did a quick research. There were 34 All-Pro corners since 2011. And I'm not saying that when you draft a guy, you're hoping and he has to be All-Pro. But out of all 34 corners since 2011, only one of them have had under 30-inch arms, and only 3 have had under 31. The one person that was under 30 is Tim Jennings, back in 2012, played with the Bears and I think 4 or 5 years in the league. And then the 3 guys under 31, Stephon Gilmore, Casey Hayward, and Janoris Jenkins. So not saying that it's a must and not saying that you have to have long arms, but the data is there. Usually the longer your arms are, the more successful you are. Now back to what the question that you asked. It matters a ton, but I will say this, it's not like McDuffie has had long arms at one point in his life and then his arms became short. So he's clearly been able to play with those shorter arms, so to speak, his entire life, and he's been able to make up for it. However, what long arms do help is in 2 phases of the field. One, at the line of scrimmage. I mean, we all see the long arm guys who are able to press, manhandle guys at the line of scrimmage. I mean, think of a Richard Sherman. Whenever you watch Sauce Gardner on film, those guys with long, rangy arms, they're able to make your life misery as a receiver at the line of scrimmage with those longer arms. And as a guy with short arms like myself, at times it gets a little dangerous when you're trying to press a guy and the receiver can just maul you and just grab you and throw you off your track with your shorter arms. And then also down the field at the catch point, and then also down the field when you're running routes on those go balls. With the shorter arms, you have to lean a little bit closer, and that's where it gets a little bit dangerous when the receiver can. We've all seen the receiver push off. We've all seen the receiver extend their arms a little bit. And with the guys with the longer arms, they're able to hand fight a little bit better. They're able to stay a little closer to the receiver on those aspects. The guys with the shorter arms, it's kind of like if you ever play football in the backyard, it's kind of like big bro and little bro when it goes down the field with those shorter arms. So is it a 100% knock? No. And actually in Buffalo, I don't think he'll be in those situations as much, which will actually be helpful. As long as you aren't asking those shorter arm guys to mirror guys all over the field and put them in situations where that length comes up, I think he'll be just fine. And those guys who did have shorter arms, outside of Gilmore, none of them were travel guys who follow guys all over the field anyway. So as long as you have a DB coach or a system that doesn't put those guys in that situation, I think you'll be fine.
Not that all slot receivers are, 5'11" or shorter. And in fact, the slot position, I think in general, is getting a little bit bigger the last couple of years in the NFL. But does that make McDuffie a better idea or more ideal to be a nickel corner in the NFL because those short arm deficiency areas are less likely to come up?
I've been going back and forth on what I think he can and can't do. His film was so impressive on the outside that if you didn't tell me what his arm length was, I would be full-fledged confident that he could play on the outside. Now, can he play inside? Yes, we've both seen his film. His feet are quick. He can move, getting in and out of cuts. He's physical, like all Washington corners are. I don't know what they do in the drills up there in the northwest part of the country, but they're physical in the run game, which will help out the nickel position. Can he play the nickel? Yes, but I wouldn't be so pressed to give up on him on the outside, because as long as you aren't putting him in those positions where he's pressing and going up against those freakish guys on the outside, like a Drake London, so to speak, or something like that, I think you'll be okay.
The one other guy I want to hit on individually in terms of the top corners, the day 1, day 2 corners. We're not going to get into, deep sleepers, day 4 or round 4, round 5 guys. But Andrew Booth is a guy that's been I wouldn't say a lightning rod, but there's certainly, I think, some significant difference of opinions. I'm not quite as high on Booth. I mean, look, you see the ball skills and the closing speed. I mean, you flip on Booth highlights and, some of the interceptions he has are just amazing. I mean, if you were judging the corners on who had the coolest looking interceptions, Andrew Booth is the winner, I think, hands down. My knocks on him, it looked like to me he's a little bit of a guesser, guy that sat back and kind of, read the quarterback more than playing, a receiver individually in terms of technique and stuff. There's technique there, but for me in the draft every year, there's one guy who I look at and say, I'm not really a huge fan, but if he turned out to be really good, it would be Andrew Booth. And I know there's a lot of people that see him, not only I've seen some mocks where he goes ahead of Stingley, because of the injury questions and, or at least goes, top 16 in the first round. If he fell to Buffalo at 25, I'm not going to knock that pick at all. I mean, you get Andrew Booth down at the bottom of the first round. That's a really, really solid corner. Carl, where do you land on Booth so far in terms of not only what kind of player you think he is, but maybe the worthiness of him as a top half of the first round pick?
So for me, I have him after McDuffie. Despite McDuffie's arm length concerns, I'm starting to turn a little bit with McDuffie. I think that film is that good to where the arm length isn't that much of a deterrent. Now for Booth, Clemson didn't really ask him to play a lot of press man and ask him to travel and follow guys all over the field, which one is it kind of hurts from our perspective because you really don't know how he's able to do that at the next level. Now he has played against teams where they've asked him to do it, but on a snap by snap basis, like for example, Mccreary did at Auburn, he wasn't asked to do it. He did a lot of press bail, a lot of off man, and he looked, I would say, pretty good at that. Just the issue is, like you just said, it seemed as if he was doing a lot of guessing instead of reacting, which is fine when the quarterback you're going against is a guy who's not going to play at the next level. A little different when in the NFL, those guys are getting paid millions of dollars to make you look foolish. So not in the DB room, not knowing what he's looking at, and maybe he is just that great of a guesser. I mean, there are guys who are just that elite at that. I mean, I think Marcus Peters comes to mind in that regard. But he has good size, 6 foot 200. He didn't run this year because he's hurt right now in the process. I think he has a hernia injury. I wouldn't be opposed to the pick at 25. I'm not as high on him as I believe Greg Newsome went in that range last year for the Browns, who I was really high on. Wouldn't be as high as in that regard this year, but I think he brings some things to the table, and with in a secondary like Buffalo, where he may not be asked to travel and follow guys all over the field, like because you got Trey White over there to do it for you, I think he'll be all right, but nothing crazy or nothing like the ceiling that I believe the first three guys have.
One of the things that's been interesting about this class is the amount of size speed guys that are in this. It's not just Sauce Gardner. That's wow, he's big and fast. It's Elam from Florida. It's Kyler Gordon in Washington. Even Tariq Woolen at UTSA. I mean, Woolen is 6'4", runs a 4.2 640. That guy's we think Sauce is a freak of nature. I mean, I don't know what the heck Tariq Woolen is. But it is unusual to see, at least it feels to me, so many guys, and I think might speak to the lack of depth, the lack of, things that I like about this class. There's a lot of guys that you look at and say, wow, there's a lot of measurables there, but I don't know if he can really cover people in the NFL. Is there anyone of that group or that you look at and think, well, this is a guy that I really like, and maybe whatever questions I have about what he does on film, I'm not that worried about the next level?
For me, it's going to be the other Washington corner, Kyler Gordon. On film, he looks like he's really athletic and looks like he can pop. He's in the run game like all Washington corners are. And then at the combine, he runs 4.5, and we're all like, well, that doesn't really match the tape. But when you watch the Washington film, he's not really getting burned, or no one's running past him. So I'm not going to put too much stock in that number, so to speak. It wasn't like, put it like this, that 4.5 didn't show up on the tape, so I'm not too concerned with it. I think the one issue that I did have with him was kind of marrying guys off the line of scrimmage. And he did get a lot of targets because no one was going at McDuffie this year, which kind of makes it a little bit harder to grade McDuffie. But I really like that his physicality, which will really help out in a system like Buffalo. Over the past, I would say 4 or 5 years or so, where the NFL has become this pace and space game, get you guys the ball on the perimeter. Long gone are the days where I don't need my corners to come up and play in the run game. No, we need our corners to be, I don't want to say great tacklers, but you need to be sufficient guys to bring guys to the ground. I think the perfect example of that is that win game with the Patriots coming to Orchard Park and playing the Bills. How many times was Levi Wallace in the run fit where Josh McDaniels said, you know what, we're going to put these corners in the run fit and dare you to make a tackle. At the next level, that is a necessity, especially in Buffalo where Leslie Frazier invites that and wants his corners to come up and do that. I think Kyler Gordon will be perfect for that. Because I asked him to come up, play off coverage like they do so well at Washington, and then from time to time go up there and put your face in the fan. That guy, for that specific reason, intrigued me.
That's a good point about, not only the way Buffalo does it, but the way the NFL is, rearranging how the run game works. When you see the Rams a lot, they go with tight formations, not only to, involve the corners in the run game, but also to make it a question for the defense. Is it a run? Is it a pass? We're going to show you a run formation with, basically Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods as like a wing, almost a tight end position, a tight end location, but as obviously a guy that's not a tight end, and, make you kind of defend that. My thing with Gordon, for me, there were too many times in the run game where he's getting blocked one-on-one by a receiver. Look, I mean, there's not a lot of receivers in the NFL that block fantastic, but like you said, it's a different league in terms of how that works. If you can't get off a one-on-one receiver in the Pac-12, then why am I going to expect you to do it in the league? But that being said, I'm coming around a little on Kyler Gordon to this point of view. I think at the very least, he's a respectable number 2 corner. I think that's a reasonable expectation for him. And that's what Buffalo needs. They already have the number 1 guy, and I know Trey White may not be that this year because he's coming off an injury, but he's not going anywhere. He's going to be the number 1 guy long-term. So if the Bills can land Kyler Gordon as the 2, I think that works out well. The thing that it just feels wrong to say, all right, we're going to spend a first-round pick on a guy who's going to be a solid number 2. It doesn't feel like you're getting good value there at 25 with that kind of selection.
No, yeah, I mean, that's a great point. And that's why if the board falls the way it does, I don't know if McDuffie will be there at 25, but if Booth is, I'm all for that and run up there. If the receiver board doesn't fall the same a certain way, go up there and don't let Roger Goodell walk back. I think Booth will be a solid pick as opposed to Gordon. There are other corners though who I do believe in that second group who will be there in the second round, so to speak. Don't think Gordon will be there in the second round, but there are guys who fit that bill of, okay, he may not be able to follow a guy all over the field. Buffalo doesn't ask you to do that anyway. That's why the Tyreek Woolen thing, although he's very intriguing, I mean, those numbers are ridiculous. I mean, like you said, whatever you think about Sauce applies to Woolen as well. But the way he plays and his style will be such a disservice in Buffalo, because in Buffalo, we're not asking our guys to be up there in the line of scrimmage and mirroring this down the third. More off coverage, more, reading the quarterback, zone stuff. And I mean, you're doing a guy a disservice at 6'4", running a 4.2, telling him to be 8 yards off the ball. It wouldn't really be helping him as much. So those quicker guys who are able to come up in the run game and then also diagnose things in zone, I think will be a perfect fit. And there's a couple guys in that day 2 range who can do that.
Roger Mccreary, one for you. I know we talked about him a little bit. I think he's really good first 5 yards off the ball. But he's also got, we talked about short arms. He's got shorter arms than McDuffie does. And he only runs a 4.5, which is still super fast. But compared to all these other guys we're talking about, everybody else is just about sub 4.4. I think McCreary can do it. I wouldn't be super excited about it. He's a guy, like if the Bills get him at 57, I might throw a party for that. But taking him in the first round, I have a question about.
Oh, 100%. And I was so impressed when I saw McCreary. The first game I watched was Alabama. And to sit up there at the line of scrimmage with Jamison Williams and John Mechie snap after snap. And if you've watched Auburn play, it's all press man. A couple times he'll play off and press bail. But for the most part, their DC says, go up there at the line of scrimmage and make their life uncomfortable. And if anyone doesn't know about Jamison Williams, that dude is 4.2 easy. If he was able to run this year, that's an easy 4.2. McCreary was at the line of scrimmage with his 4.5 speed. No fear whatsoever. It was his best game by far. I think he had like 4 PBUs or something like that. So clearly his competitive nature is there and he has supreme confidence in his gifts. Unfortunately, his mental gifts, I don't know, outweigh his physical gifts in terms of his arm length. First round, don't know if a guy who's so great in press man, but the arm length is a deterrent. Don't know if that's going to translate to the next level for first round value. But if he's there in the second round, like you said, I don't know if you let Goodell go back to the back room. You go up there and hand the card in on national TV.
One guy I want to talk about, and you don't have to talk about this guy if you don't want to, Carl, but I just want to talk about him because I just laughed like crazy watching his film. It's Alante Taylor from Tennessee. The dude's an a-hole. I mean, that's the first thing that pops out on tape. People talk about, Jerry Hughes has the alter identity, Gary Hughes. This is Gary Hughes playing corner. I mean, he is the guy that's fighting with receivers after plays, like to the point where he doesn't even bother making tackles sometimes. He's more bent on, being in the fight with the receiver. Now he's 6 foot, runs a 4.3 640. So the measurables are there like a lot of these other guys. The concern with him is that, to me, he spends so much time freaking brawling with guys. He ends up out of position, chasing receivers. But like, he looks like the kind of guy, if you can kind of harness the a-hole in him a little bit, that you might be able to turn this guy into a quality corner. So this is not even a first or a second round pick for me. But I don't know. I mean, judging what he does on film about who the person is and what kind of guy is, I don't know if that's fair to do. So I don't know if the Bills culture, if he fits into that. But man, I had a good time watching this film, and whoever he goes, I'm going to love following his career, because one of two things are going to happen. He's going to become really good, or he's going to lead the NFL in personal foul penalties and fights started and injections. And it's going to be like, hockey on the NFL if he lasts in the league.
I love to hear that, because if there's a position in sports where you need to have supreme confidence, and almost to the point where it's arrogance and a little bit of, just like, what is he doing out there? It's corner. I mean, you're out there on an island. You're out there by yourself. So if you got to do certain things to psych yourself up, play mind games, and take things over the top a little bit, then I'm all for it, because I know that we see a safety behind the receiver a lot on film, and we see, in the NFL, with the way that the hashes are, you ain't really got nobody behind you half the time anyways. So if you're doing mind games and going too far, so to speak, sometimes after the whistle, if you can harness that and put that into just full-fledged confidence on your rep and your 111, guys that like that are scary. I mean, you think of guys like Ramsey, who does stuff after the whistle. Think of guys like Sherman, who's doing stuff after the whistle. I'm not saying you can be an all-pro guy like in that regard, but a lot of those guys who are that great do take it a little too far sometimes as well. And it's because how confident they are, and they have to psych themselves up play after play because of the nature of the position.
Yeah, there's no doubt that he does get into the heads of opposing receivers. You can see it, when he's doing his post-snap thing, his, fighting to the echo of the whistle thing. There are receivers who go back and forth with him, and you can just tell that the mental focus of the guy on the other side isn't 100% where they want it to be. All right, let's close this discussion by putting yourself in Brandon Beane's position. If you need a corner, and I'll tell you what, I'll back out and say I still think Dane Jackson can be a starter. If you're going to tell me that Trey White's going to be good for week 1 of the NFL season this year, I don't feel like I need a corner, because I'll ride with Trey and I'll ride with Dane Jackson, and even Cam Lewis as the next guy, as the third guy in the team. I don't mind. The Bills can certainly probably find some minimum salaried vet to come in there and provide some experience just in case one of the two young guys doesn't work out. But if Trey White's not good for week 1, or if there's a significant concern about that, then obviously corner becomes a much higher priority. And I know a lot of fans see this position as a spot the Bills, need to find an answer for in the draft. If you're Brandon Beane looking at this corner group, to me, there's only really one option. It's trying to trade up, and I don't really mind, in general, what it costs. I don't think I'm going to go up into the top 10. And I shouldn't say I don't mind what it costs. I'm not going to go up in the top 10 for one of these guys. Because I'm not going to trade a first round this year and a first round next year for a corner at a position where I think I've got a couple guys who can play. Certainly at least one guy in Dane Jackson, who had, 5-6 really good games after Trey White got hurt last year. But if Sauce or Stingley gets out of the top 10, and I can get up to like 12 or 13 or 14, maybe with a first and a second, or a first and a third, or a first and a third this year and next year, that's my goal for this draft for the Bills. I want to try, if I can get one of those guys to slide a little bit, that's what I want to do, because sitting back at 25 and taking Booth or McDuffie, it would work, and there's a larger discussion here too about, obviously there's not just corners in this draft, and the Bills have other needs. And I think we're going to find, I'm still in the middle of looking at wide receivers. We're going to find that, 25 is probably going to be better value for a receiver than it will be, in my opinion, for a corner. But again, if I can go up to the teens or 11 or 12 and get Sauce or Stingley, I think it's worth it in this draft.
Yeah. I mean, like we talked about at the beginning of our conversation, those two guys at the top are about as good as it gets when it comes to, profiling them out of college into the league. I think, and we talk about the Bills system, how they play defense, right? And how they, corners are off and they don't ask them to do a lot of shadowing and following guys around the field. But there are also guys who are bigger than the scheme. And I think those two guys can do that. When you got guys like a Sauce Gardner, for example, if Leslie Frazier sees his ability to shut down one side of the field, it allows him to be more creative with the other 10 guys, but then allows the other 10 guys to blossom and do greater things. So just because Frazier and McDermott have had one way to play their defense in the past doesn't mean that they're stuck with playing that way for the rest of their careers as coaches. Sometimes there's players that are just that much better. And Stingley's another example. I know Buffalo doesn't have guys who, that the scheme isn't supposed to be press man and, get in their face every snap. But if that's what Stingley's good at, and that's what he could possibly be all pro at, ask him to do that. And then Poyer, Hyde, White, Taron Johnson, and actually other guys, they'll be fine doing their assignments because you're giving them less responsibility with a guy like that. So if you're able to find a way, like you said, after, I guess, 11, 12, because I believe at 10, I think with the Jets picking, I think that's where things can get dicey. If neither corner's off the board at that point, I think that's where things can get a little bit interesting. But those two guys, I think, are above the scheme. I think Leslie Frazier sees guys like that. You know what? I know we played a certain way before, but that's not going to matter now if we got those two guys.
Carl, lost you again there. There you go. You're back up now. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just saying, if Leslie Frazier gets those two guys, I think is above the scheme, and he wouldn't have no problem changing up things a little bit to get two guys like that who are, once again, above the scheme.
Let me ask you, man, the guy who played at Syracuse. So, you're on the field, the same field, a lot of Division I players, a lot of NFL players for that matter, all the time. Are you able to notice other corners that are elite level? And do you take a moment? Like, is there a guy that you stick out and you think, when I'm not on the field, I want to watch this guy play because, he was that good, whether it's a guy who is in the NFL now, maybe is about to be in the NFL, or maybe, someone we're having this discussion about next year or the year after.
Oh, for me, it's not even close. It was AJ Terrell in college, the Clemson cornerback who got drafted, I believe in 2020, so 2 years ago. Yeah. What he did against us, I knew right then and there that he was going to be box office. And I know his last game in college against Jamar Chase, I think all of us were like, okay, hold on. The hype doesn't match what we've been talking about. He gave up 3 touchdowns in the first half, and they were kind of like big boy plays that Jamar Chase made. Come to find out, Jamar Chase is actually really that good, and we were all right about AJ Terrell in that it was one bad game. And if you go back and watch the film, he was there in position. He just didn't finish and make the play, which we can work on that. And come to find out, he was second team All-Pro this year. And it was just the things that he did at Clemson that I knew he would be so great. It's not the ball production. It wasn't the plays he was making. It was how he carried himself. When he was at corner, he knew the guy across from him had no chance of getting open. He knew that whatever scheme whatever Clemson asked him to do, I'm going to execute it. And he would just walk with a certain swagger, a certain confidence. And it's when those corners who go out there and, cool, calm, and collected, looking at the corner like what you going to do? I'm right here all day. Those type of guys right there, combined it with the athletic traits that he possessed, I knew right then and there, I was like, oh, yeah. I know that I'm supposed to be meeting with our DC right now, but I got to watch what he's doing because he's clearly a really, really darn corner.
Is there a trait or a thing, when you're in like the corner room at Syracuse and, you guys are talking about what works, what's good, or maybe even like you're in drills and you're watching a guy, in front of you in the same drill, is there one or two things that stands out as a corner who played at that level? You see a guy do this or be good at that or be able to execute this that makes you think that this guy is way different than everything else I've seen?
There's two things. There's one is this thing I call it a clock, and I guess it's patience, so to speak. And we talked about it with Stingley earlier this month. So there's this thing at the line of scrimmage or even off coverage, right, where you're at the line of scrimmage and you look as if things are moving in slow motion for you, right? The guys who are really good, they're never jittery. They're just there moving in slow motion. I think Stingley is kind of too slow. Like sometimes he needs to speed up the clock just a little bit. But those guys who aren't jittery at the line of scrimmage, they're just cool, calm, and collected. Even in off coverage, they're not pedaling too fast. They're just in a nice pedal, nice even I don't want to say equilibrium, but nice balance. Those guys right there, they're confident in what they're doing out there. And then last but not least is ball skills. I mean, the name of the game is taking the ball away and going the other way. I think the days of just being a shutdown team where, you're only getting 150 yards passing, I think are done. But the guys who can take the ball away, those are the guys who are going to make a lot of money in the league. I mean, I think look at the last two corners who just got paid, J.C. Jackson and Xavier Howard. Those two guys are about as good as it gets taking the ball away. So in college, we had a couple guys who were like that, who at the line of scrimmage, that clock was just super, super slow, and you knew, oh yeah, they're going to be fine. And then we're really good at taking the ball away as well.
Awesome, man. This was fun. Glad we're doing this. We'll do this again. At least I think I'll try to do a couple times a week, man, but this was good. And I appreciate everybody who listened in. If anybody missed any part of this, it's going to be up at rochesterfirst.com a little later on. And obviously we recorded the space, so you can also check back into my Twitter feed and hear it again later today if you want. Carl, thanks for joining me. And look, the draft 3.5 weeks away. We got a lot more opportunities to do these again.
Oh yeah, I'm excited, and I think this is just the beginning of something special.
All right, cool. I appreciate it. Thanks everybody for listening, and enjoy the rest of your day. Catch you later.